In this and in the next few videos on this Critique of Pure Reason playlist, I'm going to be going through Kant's discussion of how his table of the categories of understanding can be applied to our experience of the world, to our empirical sort of experience of the world. And so I have written here, so these are his system of principles, the axioms of intuition, which have to do with quantity, his anticipations of perception have to do with quality, his analogies of experience, which have to do with relation, and the postulates of empirical thought in general, which have to do with modality. And these I will be getting into more in the next few videos in this Critique of Pure Reason playlist. But first, I'm going to talk about this idea that he has about the schema or schemata in plural. And so this is a part that seems to be kind of skipped over a bit in a lot of people's discussion of the Critique of Pure Reason, but I find this interesting and I kind of want to go through it. And so the schemata are essentially the way that sort of the connection between the appearance. So if we have the appearance of an object out here, so the object appearance, and we also have concepts. So Kant says that these are two very different things. So, the object in appearance is, this, I guess, sort of, I mean, it's this experiential thing where a concept is sort of this more abstract thing. The object is concrete and the concept is abstract and sort of, almost just like a sort of rule type thing. And so Kant wants to talk about how the object can be subsumed. So subsumed is his word that he uses. Subsumed under the concept. And so, we have that X is P sort of proposition here, and he uses the example of a plate. Plate is circle. So, like a dinner plate is a circle. And he says that the roundness of the plate is intuited in this concept of circle. And so he wants to know, essentially, so he wants to answer the question, how is a pure concept, in other words, the categories of understanding applied to appearances? So there must be some third thing between the appearances and the concepts that allows this subsumption to happen, and this will obviously be the the schema, but that's getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So he says that this third thing has to be both pure. So the third thing must be pure. In other words, not empirical. So it's not something we learn. So empirical. It's not something we learn through experience. So it has to be pure. That's what Kant means by pure. And he says it also must be both intellectual, which is sort of the conceptual version of it, and sensible. And so it must it must overlap with both the appearance and with the concept. Kant says that he uses the word homogeneous for this. He says that it must be homogeneous with both sort of the object appearance and also with the sort of, sort of rule-based or abstract concept. So it must be homogeneous with both of those. So Kant goes through this. So I kind of put it out in numbered form here. It's not numbered in the actual book. So he says that time is the formal condition of the manifold of inner sense and connection of all representations. And so that is essentially what we've talked about before, how we can be seeing this sort of object here. So we have this object here that's in our intuition, but we see it, at time t1 and at time t2 and at time t3 and so forth. And so the formal condition of the manifold of inner sense and connection of representation. So we connect all these representations, and that's what gives us sort of the object in general, not just the object as we're perceiving it at some one particular time. And so thus time contains the a priori manifold of intuition. So that's what I was just saying there. So time contains the manifold of intuition, where all these points in time come together and become sort of the manifold of intuition. So this object in here is the intuition. It is a manifold, in that it is sort of all of these representations at different times coming together into sort of a single thing. So he says time is homogeneous with the categories, which is one of our things up here that must be true of this. So it's homogeneous with the categories because it is universal and it is founded on an a priori rule. And so it's the rule that of sort of, well, it's the rule of time, that time has this sort of structure here for us, and it's a structure, and it's a priori. It's a priori in that humans, that people, that a consciousness is what brings time to bear on reality. So time is not necessarily how things exist in themselves, but it's an a priori rule. It's a thing that our consciousness actually puts onto our experiences in order for them to make sense to us. And so time is also homogeneous with appearance because time is contained in every empirical representation of the world. And so that's that sort of idea that we can't understand anything without time. And so time is in every empirical representation of the world. We have to understand things as being things in time. And so that satisfies this idea that time is homogeneous with both the categories and with appearance, which is the thing that Kant says, this third thing, this schema that he will come to call it, needs. And so number 5, hence application of categories to appearances becomes possible by the transcendental determination of time. And so transcendental determination, essentially meaning that it is the thing that makes experience possible. So I think I've talked about before, a transcendental deduction is essentially saying that this thing is true. What has to also be true in order for that thing to be true? And so the transcendental determination of time is sort of the faculty in human consciousness that makes the experience of time possible. And so he says that the transcendental determination of time mediates the subsumption of appearances under categories. And so that is what we have going on up here. So the appearances are subsumed under the categories using time. And so we can sort of think about it, if we want to sort of draw this as sort of, I guess, a schematic for lack of a better word, uh, appearances. So appearances go and they affect So Kant uses both the word affect modify and modify our sensibility, our sensibility. And so that's what sensation is. So this affecting or modifying is sensation. So sensation. So appearances, and I guess we could even say appearances of objects. So when they affect or modify our sensibility, or our senses, sight and touch and things like that, that is sensation. And so this actually gives content to the categories, or pure concepts, And so this idea that the categories of understanding are pure concepts is important because it means that they are not obtained uh, from our empirical experience. So, we can come up with like a concept of dog, for instance. So we can come up with a dog concept, and that is not a pure concept because it's a concept that we get from experiencing dogs. So this is not pure. So the categories of understanding are the pure concepts, but the sensibility uh, so gives content to the categories of understanding. And so the categories, like I said, are these much more abstract things, and they are a priori. They precede experience, and so you can't sort of picture what these categories are in your mind just by themselves. I mean, you can't picture them without the schemata, essentially. And so that's why we need the senses to actually give content to them. Uh, and so the categories also, so kind of going back here, so the categories, the formal pure, conditions. So that's that idea that the things that we experience must sort of fit into these categories. They must sort of The categories are what makes our experiences possible. And so the formal or pure conditions that the categories sort of put onto our senses. So this is the formal or pure conditions under which which the categories are applied are applied. This is what he calls the schema. So these are the schema, the formal or pure conditions under which the categories are applied. And so he also says that schematism, so schematism is the procedure of application. And so Kant also says that the schema, because we see here that we have the sensibility, which is where we would have the image. So the image would be in sensibility. We have the image here. Kant says that the image and schema must be distinguished from each other. They're not the same thing. A schema is not an image. And so Kant uses the illustration. So the image, so we can have the image of 5 dots. So the image is 5 dots. So you look at that and you see 5 dots, where schema the schema would be sort of like the concept of 5. So just like if I say 5 without actually showing 5 dots, you're not actually looking at something that is sort of an instantiation of 5, then that would be the schema. And so the way I kind of tried to conceptualize this is that if we have our x, I'm going to draw these spaced out here for a reason, x is p, so our proposition. So x would be kind of like the image, so the thing that you're actually looking at, and p, the predicate, is our concept, and the is sort of the schema. And so the schema sort of working from the concept to the image sort of makes our experience of the image possible. And then sort of working in the other direction, it connects should be connects image to. So the schema connects the image to the concept, but it also makes the image possible. So the schema is kind of like the is in the x is p, where the concept and image sort of work in sort of this this mutual recursive role. And so then Kant kind of goes through each of these things in order. So looking at the schema of quantity, the schema of quality, the schema of relation, and the schema of modality, and sort of lays out what each of these is sort of more specifically. And so for quantity, he says that the schema is the pure image of magnitudes is space. So space is sort of the schema of quantity. And he says that the pure image of all objects of senses in time, so he says that it's also the pure image of all objects of senses in time. And so the pure schema of magnitudes, he says, so the pure schema of magnitudes is number. So number is the schema here for magnitudes. And so we can think of it like this. We have the manifold of intuition. So this is sort of the objects in space, and we also have the quantity. So the quantity over here, which is the pure concepts of quantity. So pure concepts. And so that would be things like the unity in plurality, and totality. And so these are the pure concepts, so those sort of more abstract things. And so he says that the schema is number, and so that is sort of what connects. You can draw these as double arrows. So number is what connects sort of the objects in space, or the sort of experience, the intuition, the representation with quantity, the pure concepts. And so that is the pure schema of magnitude. So the next one is quality. And so Kant talks about this, so we can have quality. And so this corresponds to a sensation in general. And so it indicates existence. And so this is sort of, if this quantity is telling you how much of something is there, in terms of the shape and size of it in our experience, the quantity is sort of telling us what is there. And so I like to think of it in terms of this sort of formula where the sensation of something is equal to the reality minus negation, where reality and negation are two of the three things under quality, and this we could even say is the limitation, which is the third thing under quality. So sensation equals reality minus negation, which means that if negation is equal to reality, meaning that the absence of the thing there is what is actually real, then we can say there is nothing, that nothing is there because the reality is a complete negation. But it could also be that we could have negation being less than reality, and that would be sort of, I guess you could say, like a small or faded existence. So if something is, so say we have this sort of very orange color, that would be like a high reality, low negation. Then we have a color that's maybe a little bit less orange. That would be reality, but with a little bit more negation. So here the sensation of orange is stronger than it is here, and so the reality minus negation, so I guess we could say reality minus negation is greater here. So we'll even say reality 1 minus negation 1 and reality 2 minus negation 2. And we could say that reality 1 minus negation 1 is greater than reality 2 minus negation 2. And once again, this is, just sort of my way of conceptualizing and interpreting this. If you read this, you could come up with your own way of sort of having this make sense to yourself. But this is the way that I sort of interpret this. This isn't something that Kant actually talks about in this chapter, in this section of the Critique of Pure Reason. And so we could also have this reality happen in time. So we can see that this is in space. At this point in space, there is a higher sensation of orange than at this point in space, but we could also have it be that, say, we have right here, and say this is time. So we have at time t1, then we have time t2, and then time t3, and we'll pretend that those all have the same, they take up the same amount of space. But we could have orange at this time, and then we could have no orange at the other times. And so this right here has a negation of orange, where this has a reality of orange. And of course, we could even maybe then put this one as being the sort of less orange right here. And so this one has sort of less reality. So less reality than at time t2, but still has some reality of orange. And so this reality of some sensation, and it could be any sensation. It could be some smell or taste, or the feeling of heat, or the loudness of a sound or something like that. And so there is this sort of reality minus negation, which is the limitation of the sensation. And so that is the schemata of the quality. So sensation is the schemata of quality. And then Kant also talks about the substance. So substance, the schemata of substance is the permanence, of the real in time. And so Kant has this very Aristotelian and scholastic idea that there is a substance, so some substance, and that would be kind of like the subject in our S is P. And so there is some substance, and then all of the P's, all the different P's, so we could have S is P1, is P2, is P3. These are all sort of accidents of our subject. And the subject, absent any predicates, is the substance. The subject without any predicates is the substance. And the substance is what all accidents are sort of predicated as. And so the substance is the thing that persists. So P1 could be true at time T1, where P2 could be true at time T2, and P3 at time T3. And so even though this substance is changing, we could think about it in terms of like an object accelerating. So an object accelerating at T1 has some velocity, but then at T2 has some different velocity. But the object itself is not changing. Only the things that we are predicating of it are changing. And so it's the schemata, or the schema of substance, is the permanence of the real in time. And so he says the real in particular. So it's the actual thing that is there, the actual thing that we are sensing. So it's the permanence of the thing that we are sensing. So at each point in time, so if you see a car accelerating at time t1, you might see it at 20 miles per hour. Then at time t2, you might see it at 21 miles per hour. You aren't thinking, well, that's a different car, because this car is moving at 21 miles per hour, where that other car was moving at 20 miles per hour. The same car can't be two things at they can't be two things. And so it's the permanence of the real in time. And so the car at T1 is going 20 miles per hour. That's the real at time T1. Uh, but it is, all other miles per hour are sort of negated at time T1. But then at time T2, the 20 miles per hour is negated. Now the 21 miles per hour is real. But we have this permanence in time, and that is the substance. The car at both T1 and T2 is the same car, and so that is the permanence of the real in time. And so, uh, so Kant also goes through causality. So causality. So the schema for that is succession, the succession subject. So subject to a rule. And so succession is once again that sort of T1, then to T2, then to T3. But he says that this is subject to a rule because it's when some state of affairs at T1 causes some new state of affairs at T2. And so we can think of, we have two objects here. This one's moving, this one's sitting still, and then at T1. And then at the next point, we have this object sitting still, and now this one moving at T2. And so the succession from T1 to T2 according to this rule of causality. So the succession subject to a rule. And so, we'll go into that quite a bit more when we get into sort of the principles. But this is the schema of causality, that one thing happens after another because of some rule. And so that is causality. And then he has what he calls community. And so substance, causality, and community are all under his relation. So so I could even, I guess, write that this is relation here. This was all under relation here. And so community is the simultaneity, of objects. So if we are if we are experiencing something, there is an object here sort of to our left of field of vision, sort of the upper left, and then this one down here to the bottom right of our field of vision. And we are seeing both of them at the same time, and so they are simultaneous. And so that is his schema of community. And so then he has so we could write for this one the modality. So now we're moving on to one of the other categories, which is modality. And so for this one, there is the possibility. So the schema for possibility is the agreement of synthesis of different, I'll just write diff here, representations, I'll just write rep in time. And so that's sort of that thing I was talking about before, where if we have some object in our intuition, so this representation of an object, we are seeing it at time t1, we're seeing it at time t2, we're seeing it at time t3. And so the agreement of the synthesis is where we take all of these things together and sort of synthesize it into this single object. And so that can also So the reason there's possibility is because that object could change in time. And so at time t1, the object is for T1 is actual at T1 in some way, but then at T2 it could be actual in some other way. And so at T1, the object at time T2 was the possible object, and so not the object as it actually is, but the possible object. And so that brings us to actuality, to actuality, to actuality. And the schema for that is the existence at a determinate, determinate time. And so that's what I meant where I said at time t1 there is some representation of the object that is actual, but at time t1 the representation of the object at time t2 is a possible representation. And so the existence of it at time t1 when it's actual is the existence at the determinate time, where t1 is the determinate time. Then there is also necessity, which is the existence at all time. And so a necessary existence would be essentially, it would be something like 2 plus 2 equals 5. This is sort of this timeless 5. I got my my 1984 on the mind apparently. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is something that is true at all times. So this is just a sort of necessary truth that just by definition this is true. And so that is the existence at all time. So I wanted to conclude this video with this sort of quote at length from this section of the Critique of Pure Reason, because I think this sums up what Kant was trying to do in this part of the book. And so he says, we have thus seen the schematism of the understanding by means of a transcendental synthesis of imagination. And so imagination, remember, is that sort of faculty that he talks about that sort of can call up all of the different representations and bring it together into a unified concept, amounts to nothing else than the unity of the manifold of intuition in inner sense, and therefore indirectly the unity of apperception as a function corresponding to inner sense. And then down here, so this is the next paragraph. These schemata of the pure concepts of the understanding, therefore, are the true and only conditions under which these concepts can gain a reference to objects, that is, a significance. And thus, the categories are in the end of no other but a possible empirical use. For as the grounds of an a priori necessary unity, because of the necessary union of all consciousness in one original apperception, they serve only to subject appearances to general rules of synthesis, and thus to render them capable of thoroughgoing connection to experience. So this is that idea that we need the categories of understanding in order to have experience. The categories of understanding are what make experience possible. So all our knowledge is contained within this whole of all possible experience, and transcendental truth, which precedes all empirical truth and renders it possible, consists in a universal reference to that possible experience. And so all our knowledge contained within this whole of possible experience. And so he's talking about how the categories of understanding make experience possible here. The transcendental truth the transcendental truth, which is the categories of understanding, which precedes all empirical truth and renders it possible. And so the categories of understanding, he's saying, is a priori. It's there before experience and renders experience possible, consists in a universal reference to that possible experience. The universal reference are the schema that we've been talking about, and so that is Kant's idea here of the schema, which is the way, sort of the this mediating third thing, he calls it, that subsumes the objects of appearance. So our experience here under these concepts. And so in the next probably few videos, I'll probably do the axioms of intuition and the anticipations of perception in a single video. Then the analogies of experience will probably take at least one its own video, probably, possibly two or even more, because this is sort of the thing that Kant is really interested in, because it has to do with things like causality and so forth, which is, kind of a big thing in metaphysics and epistemology and stuff, and it's very important to Kant's project here. But anyway, I will get into these principles of the understanding, which is sort of uh, how the concepts are applied. I guess you could say via the scheme, the schemata. So how they are applied. So the schemata is actually sort of the I guess faculty of applying the categories of understanding, of applying the pure concepts. And so the principles is sort of, I guess you could say, the formula for actually applying these concepts, these pure concepts or categories of understanding to our experience. And so that is what I will be talking about in the next few videos. I hope you found this video helpful and interesting in your quest to better understand Kant, and I will see you in the next video.